All right, welcome back to the Movie Well Marathon. I'm Andrew,
And I'm Mac.
and we're
Yay.
on The Mummy Returns, directed by Stephen Sommers, released May 4th, 2001, prequel The Mummy, budget 98 million. I'm just reading this thing on this here. So yeah, we're on The Mummy Returns, which cool. We're
Mhm.
yeah, you want to do some initial thoughts real quick cuz like I could do mine. It's up to you.
I was 100% ready for this to be a total failure of a sequel, and
Mhm.
so I came out actually feeling pretty positive about it,
All right. Yeah.
because I think that it does like, there's a lot that I love from the first film that still continues in this film.
Mhm.
Um, that said,
Yes.
there were definitely some shortcomings.
Oh yes, I totally agree, and
Yeah.
I think if you were to totally sum up my thoughts, it would be very similar. I feel like this is a very fun go of it. This is an
Mhm.
enjoyable movie to watch. I think I have a little bit more of a connection to this one than I do the first, just because this was like I don't know if it was AMC, TNT, or TMC, but
Oh,
this one was on TV all the time. So
sure.
I've seen this one more. Um, like there's some fun set pieces. I think the acting is still pretty good, except for maybe like one person. And while the writing as a whole maybe a little weak, but the characters, individual motivations, and the things they do, it's all fun stuff.
Yeah.
Um, there's some wonky stuff.
Mhm.
There's some wonky effects. There are
That's honestly the most
some
consistent.
aha, yeah. There's some inconsistencies I would argue with the magic that we've been presented with, which I know no one cares about because it's a mummy movie from the early 2000s. Um, but yeah, there's definitely some good to talk about and some bad to talk about, so I'm happy to get into it. Where do you want to start?
Um Okay, this is not really a strike against the film, but I was very confused as to what time period this was supposed to be happening in for quite a bit, just because of how modern Evie's costumes are in this film.
Yeah, I mean I can kind of feel that. Well, I don't remember exactly what year the last one is set in. It's like what the 1920s or something,
Yeah,
or
that would be consistent with the technology that they
ish,
showed.
and this is 9 years later. So I guess maybe the 1930s, give or take. I don't know for sure, but it's around that era.
Okay, then I definitely have a question for Evie's wardrobe person because
Well, now I'm
she looked like
confused. Would
she
they
was
have had a
born.
double decker bus like that in the 19? Okay, keep going because you're making a good point.
Yeah, there's just I don't know. Because I don't have any issue with the way that she looks per se. Like I think she looks fine in terms of like aesthetic value or pretty. She's pretty. But like she looks like she could be walking around today and aside from a couple of, like, the adventuring pants that they put her in,
Hmm.
it would fit in. And I think it's just I was a little bit jarred because in the last film, they were so intentional about the
Yeah,
period
they were
dress,
pretty
and
good
in this
about
one,
it.
they drop that.
Yeah.
Um, that's not really super important. It's just something that kinda took me out of the film at the beginning. And then I also, like I can't decide how I feel about the reincarnation thing because I don't
Oh,
totally hate it,
yeah.
but
But,
it's not
but,
good.
yeah.
It's
Uh huh. So,
'Cause, like, the the beloved one of the mummy of
Anoxinomoon.
Amun yeah,
Anoxinomoon.
Anoxinamun, she I kinda like it. She shows up out of nowhere, like, this new version of her, the reincarnation of her,
Hmm.
but I like the sort of dynamic that it creates, I think that's fun. Um I don't know why we wanted to suddenly then have Edie also be a reincarnation.
I
I thought it'd be
know.
way cooler when she first started having visions and stuff, I thought it was gonna be a situation where it was because of her experience with the mummy and the fact that she did temporarily harbor the
Ah,
spirit of the, Anakma's son. Oh gosh, I gotta get this name right.
Anoxinomoon.
Anck-Sunamun. She like, I thought it was gonna be, like, leftover stuff from that,
Mm.
and that she was like still had pieces or memories from that experience, and so she was involving herself with that. But then it just ends up being like a, oh, it turns out no, I'm actually a reincarnation,
Uh-huh.
and I don't think they pull it off. It feels very, so we said, so it is.
Yeah. Excluding Dwayne Johnson's inclusion, I feel like the reincarnation is the weakest part of this whole movie
Mm.
because it is weird, it's inconsistent, it's a little strange. Like they don't. It's not fully out of nowhere. I mean, it is, but Evie does say in the first movie how her mother is Egyptian, so she does at least
Right.
have an Egyptian bloodline, which is kind of interesting that they kind of did that. But there, so first side note, she is a reincarnation, Evie, that is a reincarnation of Nefertiri. Originally, that was Nefertiti, who is a more famous Egyptian fair queen, who I'm a big fan of. I owned as a child a documentary on her. Um, they changed that because they thought people would make tit jokes, so they changed it to Nefertiri, who is another real queen, but they changed the T to an R because they didn't trust the audiences. As a kid who didn't have subtitles on all the time, I honestly thought it was Nefertiti, and I thought, oh, that kicks ass. And then I saw the subtitles and was like, who the fuck is that? Anyway, it's a little bit strange because, for one, Imhotep says to the Anaxunamun reincarnation that you're reincarnated in body alone. However, Ardith Bay already lays out that she knows shit she shouldn't know, and she's got
Mm-hmm.
the memory. She's got memories. It's like, well, we don't really see that Anaxunamun has memories. Like, yeah, well, okay, well, we do see that Evie does. Evie straight
Mm-hmm.
up has memories that Nefertiri has, and she is
Mm-hmm.
not. She doesn't have the soul of Nefertiri. So like and then they have to do that weird ritual where Imhotep brings the Anaxunamun's soul up out of the underworld with like, does he sacrifice her own body? Like that doesn't make any sense because she doesn't die. I looked really close at it this time. She does not stab herself. It's like she
No,
died.
yeah.
It's like he killed the soul that was in Anaxunamun's body by reliving the time that the real Anaxunamun killed herself. It's insane to me. It doesn't make any sense. It also, I think, creates this weird situation where it's a little bizarre that these characters have this entangled destiny and none of it was relevant 9 years
Oh yeah.
ago. Like I
Yeah.
think if you wanted to do, and I know this is hindsight 2020 and all that, if you were gonna do a story in which the fate and all that was significant, it was the last one because otherwise, like this movie is implying that because of fate and destiny, Evie would have come to the tomb anyway, and Rick would have found her anyway, and Emotep would have been found anyway, which means everything that happened 9 years ago was just for kicks. Like,
Mhm.
I really don't like that. I don't vibe with that. It's a little bit wonky for me.
It's very sequel. It's like a super sequel move
Yeah.
to take a piece of costume off of your main
Uh
character and be
huh.
like,
Uh huh.
"This tattoo
This has
was
been
under
here
here the
the whole
whole
time.
time."
Yeah. No, I don't. I do not love that. I'll give them props for putting it somewhere that we didn't see before. Um,
Mhm.
but still, like, come on, man, come
Yeah.
on. So yeah, I
It
also
if we kind of forgive the fact that the reincarnation thing doesn't make a lot of sense, and the whole, like, sort of, like, plugging in the destiny pieces, it like, kind of retroactively, even though they didn't come up into play at all in the first one, then, like, it's kinda cool the way that they weave the fates together, but it also doesn't feel like it was necessary. Like, you could just have them be the people with the experiences that they've
Yeah, like
had,
they could have absolutely
and
done
they'd be
this
the ones
without the
to
fate thing.
respond to the
Yeah.
situation. Like, I mean, they're already engaged. Like, they have to participate in the action because their son put the bracelet on.
Right.
So, like,
That's
there's
enough.
no need to further implicate their connection to the
No.
situation. Like, you don't have to make them
It
chosen ones
right.
or reincarnated
It really doesn't
characters.
matter in the end. If anything, it'd be kind of interesting if they just found a girl who looked like a Noxunamun and, had some
Mhm.
interesting story there. Because there's also, in the last movie, Imhotep thinks that Evie is a Noxunamun because she's just a pretty
Yes.
lady. Like, that's all it took. Like,
Mhm.
if we want to be consistent now, he would have woken up and been like, Nefertiri?
Mhm.
This isn't what it looks like. Like, but that's not what they do.
We should remember that he took the blind guy's eyes.
Yes, there's that. They also he wakes up and they like skip a stage of mummy rejuicification.
Mhm.
He immediately appears with a tongue and eyes. Why? Why do they do that? They also they introduce this weird idea of like I feel like the last movie was just enough magic, just enough adventure, just enough horror where like you don't really get a lot of time to think about the implications and the rules all that much. But then this movie, I
Mhm.
think, introduces these things again in a way that makes you question it. So, like, he has to absorb the juices from the people that open this box. But they already have in that train car his canoptic jars,
Muppet
so
Yards.
what are we opening the box for? And how like is it every time someone closes that box and reopens it, or only when you're on the planet that they reopen it and it becomes a problem? And is it only the
Mm.
people in the room who open it? Because only one guy opened it. Also, you absorbed the juices of like 5 guys last time, and this time you did 3, and it was enough. So like, what is going on? Like, I kind of wish they wouldn't have done that whole plot thing again. I kind of wish
Mhm.
it was more of a we are the weird priests of the pharaoh 3000 years ago, and we know because of the magic powers that this mummy man has, whoever opens this box, if he's alive, he's going to specifically choose you and use the power he has in general to suck the juices out of people to regenerate himself because it's like part of a ritual or something. But like, maybe just give him the ability to do it, like just
Mhm.
don't do this again. This is weird. I feel like
Yeah.
you're bogging yourself down now with this weird, because like you introduce these characters that are nothing characters just to be sucked dry. It was kind of cool to actually see it happen because we don't see it
Mhm.
happen in the last movie, and that's that.
Although it does put the highlight on the special effects.
Oh yes, I think that's a good segue. You want to talk about your
Mhm.
opinions on the special effects, because I've got some harsh words.
It's a disappointment to go like, I mean, obviously the Mummy special effects aren't perfect. There are quite a few shots where the Mummy is obviously a CG sort of creation, but most of the like practical effects and stuff they do in the first one feel pretty legit. Like we're clearly in a movie. There's nothing about the visuals of the mummy that make you think this is happening in real life. But everything is consistent to itself, and so it feels all very believable when you're watching it for the most part. This was like CG fest a little bit.
Mm,
And it really didn't need to be
I
a
don't
lot
think
of the
so either.
time. Like,
Yeah.
there were a ton of really big power magic moves that they made that, like,
Mm-hmm.
didn't need to be as big as they were to get the
Mm-mm.
idea across, and they were
Mm-hmm.
just like, "Let's just use all the special effects." So much so that by the time they get to the Scorpion King,
Oh, don't
they
even.
used all of their time and their budget apparently,
Oof.
because that I
Oof,
mean,
oof,
the big
oof.
reveal,
Oh, I know.
it makes you feel like you're in a video game all
It's
of a sudden.
awful.
It's really bad.
Yeah. People have talked about that a lot. The Corridor Crew guys actually went back and fixed it, and it actually looks pretty good.
Mhm,
But yeah, absolutely. I was thinking right away this was rough because we start with the Anubis Warriors, and I was like, this feels like a
mhm.
made-for-TV movie you'd see on Sci-Fi in 2005. Like, it's not just the
Yeah.
quality of the animation not being great, it's the design of these things too.
Mhm.
the super skinny body with the great big head that's like so distinctly early 2000s. But the other thing was, I think what helps, sorry, doesn't help, it helps it make it look worse. What hinders it further is that it's these movies are old enough now that the 1999 movie kind of has that look of nostalgia about it, both with the way they did costumes, but not just the way they did costumes, like the way they film it, the quality of the film, all that. It feels kind of old now. So the special effects kind of fit into where this is. This movie, even though it's like, what did I say, 3 years, 4 years later? Let's say for right now, it's like, it was 2001, 2002, I don't know, early 2000s. The cinematography, the film quality, everything else looks a lot newer. The special effects haven't improved, and that makes it look worse, which is really unfortunate.
It's kind of a bummer because I think what ultimately ends up happening throughout the whole film, largely in part because of the special effects, but also not exclusively because of it starts to feel less. It's hard to say less believable because again, you don't really believe at any point in the events that are happening in The Mummy. You're
That's
just
a good
along for
point.
the ride.
Yeah.
But you like in this one, it feels more patched together than the other one does, which is crazy because kind of like how we were talking in the last episode, there is no one consistent goal through the entire film. They jump around based off what's happening and what they're trying to do. And so it should feel patched together, but it largely doesn't because of the consistency of the characters and the way that they interact. The problem with this film is they have more or less one consistent goal through the entire film, but it feels more disjointed and less sort of believable, or maybe there's less of a whole or a sort of like you buy in less
Mm-hmm.
because the CG is bad. And if we're being honest, a lot of the script is bad too.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
So the actors, I think, are still genuinely doing their best, giving
Mm-hmm.
their all. I noticed some really, really cool fight choreography that I think would be fun to
Yes.
talk about.
Sure. Yeah.
But largely, the in between moments of this film struggled because even though there was a more consistent drive throughout the entire plot, there was the stuff that made the first Mummy so good is very weak in this film. The special effects and the set is a little bit less believable, and our script doesn't convey the characters the same efficiency that the first one did.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. It's it, but it's weird because, as we said, it's a fun ride, but it has very obvious flaws, and
Yeah, yeah.
it is a shame. If we wanted to maybe for a second talk about some positives, just to
Mhm.
since we're almost 20 minutes in and it's mostly been negative.
We started off saying that we are genuinely positive about the
Yeah,
film.
I know. So let's revisit that real quick. I think as far as sequels go, this does fairly well with balancing revisiting old stuff and doing new things mostly.
Sure.
Like we said, don't like bringing the box back necessarily, and we got to do the bugs again and all that. But like they don't really
I
do.
kinda I didn't wanna say anything then because you were kinda, like, making a whole point. I do kinda like that we see that step again because we already know what's going on, whereas in the last one, it was sort of
Ah,
like, "Oh my gosh, what's happening?" This one is like, we know what's happening, and they go through
okay,
pretty quickly through it. I think it could be a little faster, though, and I think it does raise a lot of questions about the box, so you're not in my opinion, what you said is legit. I just don't mind that we
fair,
see it again.
fair enough, fair enough. So we'll say that's like a half and half. Okay.
Mhm,
I do think it's kind of cool to see Emotep again. We'll come back to the writing as
mhm.
to whether or not that makes any sense. I
Sure.
really like Evie and Rick's dynamic, their chemistry, how well
Yes.
they work together as characters. Like they
Happily
have,
married couple with a kid is
I
such a good move for a sequel. Please, no more
yes,
divorces, no
I
more new
know they
girlfriends.
so seamlessly became who they were as cool adventurers and parents. Rick as a dad is so good, so believable, and yet he's
Mhm.
still Rick. Evie as a mom is so good, so believable, but it's still Evie. Like, it's so great. I love all of it. And there's no resentment, there's no weird bitterness. They're still clearly madly in love, but they're still themselves. She's still the academic, he's still the adventurer. I kind of like that though he leans more into being protective because he's
Yeah.
got the family. Like, but he doesn't go full Paddington 1 dad, like walks into the hospital on a motorcycle, leaves with a minivan. Like, they didn't do that. He's still an
Mhm.
adventurer, and he's still walking around with sticks of dynamite in his pants. But it's more like but maybe we don't rush in right away. Maybe we think
Mhm.
about this. Like, I like that. On top of that, I like Alex. He
Mhm.
definitely has the potential to be a really annoying character. I don't usually like kids. I think they mixed Evie and Rick perfect amount in this little son of a bitch because he's
So
easily 50% Rick, 50%
Mhm.
Evie. I think the little actor they got does pretty well. I like his little
Mhm.
accent. He reminds me of like if Gordon Ramsay was a child. And it's very fun. I like that he uses his intellect throughout the movie, but he's also a
Mhm.
kid, but he's also brave like his dad. Like, all of it is great. Um,
Yeah.
just a couple of little quick ones, and I want to hear your positives. I like Ardith Bay being back. I really, really, really do. I think that would have been something that could
Yeah.
have easily kind of just forgotten about. I love that he's
Mhm.
here. He's an ass kicker. Love it. I like that thing we talked about last week with Jonathan being the bumbling idiot Barney Fife kind of comic character, but he's not useless. He has the things that he can do. He's got that scene where he's driving a double-decker bus through London and doing it successfully. And then there's the
Mhm.
sharpshooting scene when they fight the pygmies.
Mhm.
I kind of wish there was more of that. Like, more
Mhm.
specifically of him. He really only has like one explicit moment and then others that are implied. I don't know if you've seen The Last of Us or not, but there's like a really good sniper helping a person down on the ground surrounded by
Mm.
bad guys scene. I wish they would have done
Mhm.
more of that. But again, it's
I
not
think
him lucking into things. It's not him being, helped in these moments. He's actively a part of this team, and I really like that they were consistent with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually do like that, and I'm gonna butcher this, Imhotep, the
Imhotep.
mummy?
Yeah.
Imhotep. I like that he's back. It's maybe a little kinda defeatist, like, sometimes to immediately revive your first movie's villain for the second
Right.
movie sometimes can feel a little funny, but I feel like it actually works really well in this film because of the complex dynamics that it creates again. The first film I always thought was very interesting because of the way that like Imhotep is the villain, clearly, because he's killing people and we don't want him to do that. And we also don't want him to like take over the world. But in his own story, he's just kind of like a Romeo. Like he's Romeo and Juliet and he's trying to make a world where he can be with
Mm-hmm.
his Juliet, right? Um I like that they continue that here, but they very quickly provide a not song. Oh god.
Anaxunamun.
I don't have it written down anywhere, so I don't have like a visual clue. Anyway, I like that they're together right away because then we don't spend another film on the exact same quest again.
Right. Yeah.
And I like the dynamic that it creates having two of them
Hmm.
going against the two of Evie and Rick. Like I think
Yes.
that's kind of
Yes.
fun. Um, and I think it's very fun to see sort of like especially at the end. It's a little forced, a little heavy-handed, but when Evie risks everything to save Rick, when Rick
Hmm.
doesn't really want her to, and yet Emotep calls for her and she doesn't come,
Hmm.
like that's very interesting.
I really wanted to talk about that, if you don't mind, for like just a moment, because
Sure.
I don't know how to
Editing
take.
character.
Well, no, not that. I don't really know how to interpret it anymore. So when I was younger, it was very like I think I took it at very surface level. Rick says go, so Evie helps. and Emotep is selfish and wants help, so Inoxinamoon leaves. But now, I feel like if I were in that position, I think I would say what Rick says. But in a healthy, loving relationship, I don't think it would necessarily be wrong to ask your partner for help. And thinking about it again, watching these movies and being very critical and just trying to pay more attention, I don't think there are many villains who are actually truly motivated by love the way that Emotep clearly is. Like he does want to like take over the world or whatever, but like very little about anything he does actually ever gets to that point. So much of this is about Inoxinamoon. And there aren't many villains that are actually consistently, legitimately motivated by that. And the fact that he ends up ending himself because she leaves, I find to be very intriguing. So like how do you feel about it? Is it selfish of him to ask that? Or is it entirely fair and believable? Like I don't know, like I don't even know if I'm making sense at this point. I just found it intriguing this time around.
There's a side of general culture that could be attributed to toxic masculinity, but maybe is just like general toxic romance, which is that you give everything for the people that you love, right? And that's kind of what Rick is showing in this film. He's going out of his way to protect the people he cares about at at any cost, any risk. But I wouldn't call him wrong for telling Evie to leave, right? Because that's just him trying to protect the person he loves.
She also had just come back to life. I just want to add that because like he does kind of get into like he's overly protective. I would argue he's an example of maybe healthy masculinity. Just in that specific moment, she already died. I would be a little more like, hey, maybe don't do something that'll get you killed again.
Like I just experienced your loss. Don't make me go through it again.
Yeah, don't do that again, please.
And I'm not trying to critique Rick. In fact, the opposite. I'm just like trying to think through all the steps that you've like all the thoughts you've put in front of me. Because I think it is right for Emotep to call for help too, and also potentially that makes it okay for Anak to not help as well. I just don't know that it's in character because she's the one that commits suicide in their original relation.
It kind of feels like it's not Inoxinamoon and more the girl that was in this movie the whole time who it's a little inconsistent.
And I don't know, like she does commit suicide with the knowledge that she could be reincarnated, but and maybe she felt like that was at risk here. But it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't, because like that original story is very Romeo and Juliet with the star-crossed lovers can't be together, would rather not be in the world if the other's not there, right? And this one, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, I wonder, because we don't really get a lot of Inoxinamoon, technically speaking. I'm wondering if it wasn't star-crossed lovers. She saw Emotep and was attracted to his power. And once he had it removed, he wasn't worth it anymore. But she never actually loved him the way he loved her.
Maybe he was just kind of a conduit for her.
Maybe.
Still, it feels like suicide would be an extreme step for someone that you're just trying to use.
That would be an extreme step for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
I don't know. That's just something to like think about. Did she come back in the next film? Well, maybe I don't want to know. It's fine.
No.
Okay. So there is no more development on this idea. I just thought it was interesting because it, like so much of the first film is about how these two, as bad as it is for everybody else, their love transcends time and space. But the second film ends with the betrayal of that love.
Right. Yeah.
So
poor writing.
Yeah, it really felt like they probably should have just both gone over the edge together, like to keep up with the sort of consistency between the characters, but the fact that they're still villains, they still need to go down. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she should have run to him, but it was too late, and they both fall down, like,
Something.
together,
Yeah.
ending their story, right?
Something
But I
like
think they
that.
maybe wanted to try and use her again or something, like, writing-wise, it's a waste to kill
Maybe.
both of your villains. But whatever. I think that moment's very interesting. I think the fighting in that scene is more or less very fun and interesting. I mean, you have to kind of excuse some of the CG stuff, but largely it's pretty engaging. There was a moment where when the girls were fighting, and I thought the fight choreography with those like knives were pretty
Yeah,
good. I
not
want to call
bad.
them I think that they were. It was fast. I've
Mm.
not seen fast choreography in a while, and it was really cool to see him engaged like that.
Fair
I
enough.
don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I liked that Evie was given combat skills in this one, which was a
Mm.
side effect of the weird reincarnation thing, but it was fun to see her actually engage in some of those
Yes,
scenes a little more
yes,
finesse.
absolutely. It was good to have her doing some ass kicking for sure.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
It
I
it
have
is
some critiques on their parenting style, but overall, them as characters and as parents were pretty good.
yeah. What's your negative take on the parenting style? Because we don't get to see a lot of the parenting.
You're in a life-threatening situation, you keep kissing your wife when your kid is over in the
Oh,
corner.
fair enough. Yeah, I felt the same way.
Like
That's not great. Priorities, priorities. They're madly in
yeah.
love, Mac. They can't help it.
Yeah, but, like, you'll have time for that later.
Yeah,
Maybe just keep an eye on your kid. Like, most parents would, like, be a hand-holding in that situation, like, "You
very
don't
true.
leave my arm reach."
Very true. Yeah, it's a good point.
Like, I don't blame blame them for what's going on in the house because kids mess around in the living space and
Right.
say random stuff all the
But
time
on
in
the
the house. I don't
bus,
blame him for what goes down in the house, but in the bus,
yeah,
he's
that's
not leaving your
rough.
side.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Oh, I did want to mention, I do think this has some pretty good jokes in it. I really
Mm.
like the part where Jonathan's like, "Oh yeah, they won't cross those sacred stones," and then that guy gets impaled. I really like when Evie tries to barricade a door and Rick's like, "What are you doing? These guys don't
They
use doors." Like I love it. I love
a
how
couple of shots
Rick.
later, they're breaking out the walls,
Yeah,
like, yeah.
I love how Rick is very much like on the edge of a mental breakdown this whole movie because his wife gets
Yeah.
abducted, his son gets abducted, he's constantly having to save people, his wife is going through some sort of weird vision reincarnation thing and almost jumps off a sky boat. Like his brother-in-law is
Mhm.
breaking into his house, there are mummies coming back to life again. Like he is doing everything, and he's keeping it together, and
Mhm.
that's a lot. That's a lot.
Mhm. It's true.
He's going
They never stop
through it.
stressing the poor man out.
No, they don't. They really, really don't. Poor guy. I did want to point out I had mentioned last week how it's kind of weird how the spell that brings Imhotep back to life seems to only affect him and no other
Ah,
mummies. Then in this
mhm.
movie, we see that the spell seems to affect all the mummies in the surrounding area. Oh, which is it? And also, what happens to those mummies when they leave? Like, do they just stay alive banging on the glass?
That
Because
would be
we
terrifying.
never readdress that ever. I also kind of feel like they introduced like I mean, all you had to do is say some of those mummies were found somewhere that was connected to Emotep, because to have a scene showing a bunch of mummies were already brought back to life, and then also want your special effects department to do a scene where dust turns into four mummy warriors that look awful. Like that whole thing just
Mhm.
looks bad. You already introduced the mummies, man. You didn't have to do it again. You didn't have to do
Yeah,
more. Just have Emotep summon the
bring
ones that are
different mummy
upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're up
I
there.
thought it was cool. It doesn't last for the whole film, but I liked that the movie was set so, like, clearly in London
Yeah.
for a while.
Mm.
Like, kind of how the first film is very atmospheric for Egypt, this one is, in the beginning at least, very atmospheric for London and England,
Mm.
which I thought was a fun sort of like change but consistent style step for a sequel.
Yeah.
To put that kind of attention and detail into your setting, but to make it a different location.
Right. Well, we want to explore, lots of different Egyptian artifacts, and a third of them are in the British Museum. So we got to be in London for at least a little bit. Colonization. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Our
But
main
no,
characters aren't a part of that at all.
yeah. But it was fun to be there for a little bit. They do that again in a later movie. We'll see if it's done well or not. But yeah, no, all that's good stuff.
Yeah.
I do. Speaking of set pieces, though, I think again one of the reasons why the first one works is Hamunaptra feels very physical. We were there,
Mhm.
and Share is like 60-40, man. Like we walk through some
Yeah.
trees, and then once we're inside the pyramid, it kind of feels real, but it's also like it's so bright and weirdly stacked up with shit and weird statues that it feels more like a theme park ride than it does a real tomb.
Yeah, it departs from realistic Egyptian architecture
Yeah.
in an attempt to show, like, the extra stuff about it,
Yeah.
when in reality, it just, again, makes it feel less consistent.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I could not help but point this out. I think it's insane that people stumbled across Hamunaptra, this place that is protected by a mirage, but no one has ever found Amsher, which I imagine from the sky would be a massive
Well,
green spot in this vast desert. It's not hidden by anything in this
no.
story. The bracelet doesn't like allow you through some sort of magical force field. It doesn't activate the forest. There's not a hidden underground tomb. It's just this massive oasis and no one has ever found it. That's insane. Absolutely insane to me.
No, no one's found it. It's fine.
Didn't like that. Thought that was dumb as heck. Super dumb. Ugh. But there's yeah. How did I get to this? I was talking about good things.
I don't know, I feel like that's a lot of the film. I kinda like I feel more positive about it than I do about the general reincarnation stuff. I don't know how I feel about the fact that Evie dies. Like,
I actually kind of thought that was cool. I wish they were a little more vague about Alex's plan because it's so dramatic and cool.
yeah.
And but like it's immediately evident what they're gonna do. That was
Yeah.
one of the jokes they brought back from the first one that I thought was okay with them not knowing the one sign, and it's the one that
Yeah,
Jonathan
he's
was
like, "I
told.
know
Like,
that
I
one!"
know that one. Like that's kind of fun. I kind of dig that.
Mhm,
It is interesting to think though. So like, could you just like do this forever? I mean, with Emotep and the
mhm,
equation, I guess you technically can.
mhm.
So, but like, I'm intrigued though with the rules, right? Because you bring Emotep back, and he's a shambling, rotting corpse. Does Evie have a gaping wound in her gut now? Like, is she healed? Like, what are the rules?
She seemed just
She seemed
fine.
fine.
So,
She seemed fine. She glowed, or the book glowed. Something glowed.
they could've if they didn't use their special effects budget on literally everything else, they could have spent more time on the like the reviving bit of
Mm-hmm.
Evie. I felt like this is one of those things that's hard to pace, largely because of everything else going on in the film and the fact that the other writing wasn't great. But like to have a character suddenly die is actually a good writing choice most of the time because that's usually how death occurs. Like you
Mm-hmm.
don't expect it, right?
Yeah.
And so to like have Evie just sort of like get stabbed out of nowhere, I don't hate that choice.
Mm-hmm.
And then the choice to like treat it as if it's going to be a real death. There's a real grieving moment. There's a real death scene. All that makes it more believable. I
Yes.
like that.
Well acted
Um,
too. Again, Ricochet
mhm,
O'Connell doing the work. Damn.
yeah, yeah. Um, but where it's placed in the story and what's going on at the moment, I just kept thinking, I don't like. it feels wrong for her to die right now
Mm-hmm.
because I can't take the time to grieve the character. Nobody can take the
Yeah,
time to
right.
grieve the
We're
character.
going into the
And
final
there's also
boss. Like
enough
this is
yeah. There's also, like, enough like, they kinda try to do, like, a revenge arc thing with it, which almost makes sense, except for her last request was for Rick to take care of their son, and he just goes off and he's like, "Imma leave you, kid, and go get some revenge, and then I'll come back for you," right?
right.
Like, and like, you could argue there's, like, a whole, like, world-saving element to it too, but it's clearly supposed to be kind of a revenge arc, but it's not I think my issue with it is it's not well executed.
Mm-hmm.
The timing is weird. The way that they pace it is weird. The way that we almost instantly know what he's going to do because he, like the kid Alex tells us
Right.
what it
Yeah.
is more or less. Like none of it allows for the emotional beats to fall where they're supposed to, or at least it didn't for me on this watch. So I would almost because they can't write it well, I would prefer there not to be a death. Or potentially you like stab her and she's dying, but if you were able to get this one resource or stop this one
Sure.
thing, she'll
Yeah.
be fine. And that adds pressure to the end of the story
Mm-hmm.
rather than just sort of like there's a loss and now there's kind of a two-pronged ending, one take down the king, two save Evie.
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally fair. Fair criticism. I hadn't thought about it that much just because I do like the reveal of her coming back and giving Alex one thing to do, but like you're right.
Mhm.
But thinking again,
I do like Alex's job is to save his mom. I think he could just do it better.
yeah. Oh, totally fair. Absolutely. Thinking more about some like third act stuff. I don't love how they kind of seem to spend like half a day walking from the beginning of the Oasis to the pyramid, but Ardith Bay kind of just teleports from where he decides to
Yeah,
leave the fight to outside the Oasis
yeah.
where the army is. Um,
Mhm.
that's fun. I do like Horace. Love Horace. Horace is great. Hate that they kill Horace. Breaks my heart.
I
It was an awesome little addition. Super fun.
they set up that death maybe better than Amy's.
Yeah.
I was sitting there, I was like, "Don't do it,
Oh yeah.
no!"
Like,
And
oh,
then they shot
he's gonna
him.
kill that bird. Yeah. And then yeah, the giant water wall. That's rough. Really rough. Don't love that. The pygmies. I'm 50-50 on because the special effects are awful. It's something different, kind of.
I don't hate them, but it does feel like a weird choice.
Yeah, definitely a strange choice. Izzy. I like Izzy mostly. I think he's kind of fun. I think it's interesting that they travel Egypt in a boat, since so much ancient Egyptian iconography is like the gods traveling through the sky on a boat.
I
Like,
hadn't even thought of that.
oh,
That's
Mac, I was
great.
there right away because I love this shit.
Mhm.
I know of like two different Egyptian stories for like the sun going across the sky, and I don't know which one is like more popular. I've heard that it was like a giant scarab that rolled the sun,
Mhm.
which for some people who don't know, scarabs are just dung beetles. So the sun was a ball of dung that it was rolling. But the other one I've heard was that like Ra, the sun god, would move it across the sky in a boat or whatever. So I kind of like that. That was interesting. It does feel again like something they did in the first one that they amp up, which like isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a guy from Rick's past, and they've got a history, and
Mhm.
he's whatever. He's fun.
He's a goofy little character.
Yeah, I like his dramatic hero save moment because in that moment, like
Yeah.
they don't keep cutting back to him trying to fix the boat. So by the time that
Mhm.
happens, I feel like you kind of forget
You
about
forget the
him.
concept.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like that's a pretty good save in the end. Um, but all that being said, I don't think it makes sense that it takes so long for them to catch up to them because they're traveling by skyboat, and then after the train, Emotep and friends are traveling by horse.
Yeah.
So how the hell does it take them that long to catch up? They had like half a day's head start. Like Come on, man. And
Honestly, the whole goose
one of the
chase
things is
kind of
an
feels
island.
unnecessary.
Sorry, what?
The whole like, goose chase feels kind of
Oh,
unnecessary.
it
They're jumping from
is. It is. And
place to place.
also, what was Alex drawing in the sand when what's his name?
I don't
Lochnar?
understand.
Yeah,
Oh
because
wait, no, I do. It's a map to the pyramid.
oh, is it?
Yeah, he drew a circle with a triangle in it and like
Uh-huh.
some angles off of it. He was for sure drawing a map to the pyramid.
Okay, because I wasn't really sure what that was supposed to be because there was nowhere else to go. They were there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but maybe that makes sense. So
I didn't get it till like just now. I was thinking about it. I was like, it's not an arrow, it's just a triangle. Oh, pyramid.
mhm. Interesting. Fair enough. Yeah, I mentioned before, and I'll say it again. It's unfortunate that they included Dwayne Johnson in this. Um, we didn't know it at the time, but as of recording and as of
Mine,
posting, we do live in a time where every franchise that man touches falls apart because of his ego. And I think that a lot of that happened
oh,
behind
this
the
is
scenes.
clearly in his like before the bit of his contract that says that he can't lose because he
Uh huh.
lost.
Yeah.
So I thought that was satisfying.
Yeah, that's nice. Like the one time. And he looks
This
awful.
is like a year after his episode in Voyager. He loses in Voyager too.
Dwayne Johnson was in Voyager?
Mhm.
Oh, I had
He's a
no
bit
idea.
part. Seven of Nine gets thrown in an alien like gladiator
Gladiatory ring?
ring. Is that what it was? Okay, I said that. I was like, I'm not sure that's a real thing. Like a real phrase of the word. Anyway,
Arena, I think typically.
but
Gladiator
they
arena.
fight. Yeah, that's the one. And they fight. And if I remember correctly, he loses.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you got, or are we wrapping up this one a little bit early?
I
Wrapping up.
don't know that I have much. I don't know that I have much else to say about it. I feel like, again, I do come away from it feeling fairly positive, but there
Mhm,
were some really like glaring issues that if you don't take them like quote unquote personally, it kind of works anyway.
mhm.
If you ignore the fact that the special effects aren't super good, then the things the special effects are doing are kind of cool. It's maybe
It's
sometimes unnecessary.
right. It's a little rough to do that just because this one has more special effects. So you do have to
Hmm.
ignore a little more. I would say, in a weird way, this one is definitely not as good as the first one, but I have almost just as much
Yeah,
fun watching it.
sure.
Like
Yeah,
almost.
I would say it's very similar for me. I think the first one is still like king per se,
Yeah.
but when it like I would not be opposed to watching this film if I was like, "Hey, let's sit down and watch The Mummy."
Yeah,
Like, I
absolutely.
still wanna watch The Mummy first,
Hmm.
but if we were then decide to like, "Hey, we should watch the rest of them," then I would also watch this film. I don't know about the rest, like the 3rd one yet, but I would watch this one right
Yeah.
after The Mummy and
I
still enjoy it at the same
yeah, I
time.
think it's also it's different slash similar enough that you don't have to watch the first one to understand this one. Like they set this one up
Mm,
fairly well enough that you
mhm.
could just watch this one. Because if you watch just this one, you see, yeah, Jonathan, yeah, you understand their dynamic right away. You understand that Rick and Evie have a history of doing this. You understand that they fought a mummy in the past. You understand that Ardith Bay was someone they encountered in the past. Like, nothing that happens in the first one really creates anything for this movie,
Sure.
except for, damn, how did they afford that house? Well, it's because of the gold that Benny put on one of their camels. Like, that's the only thing, really, I would argue. Because the rest of it's just like,
Mhm.
it's Star Wars 4. You fought in the Clone Wars? Like, I'm sorry. The Clone Wars? What the fuck is that? Like, no one knows what that is when they make that movie. Like,
Right.
you could just watch this one by itself and it stands on its own.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think it's a perfectly fine sequel.
Yeah. I don't know though if I'd say it's a whale. This is one of those where like I'm really close, but
No.
I don't think I could say in good conscience it's a whale.
Kind of the same thing. Again, I have fun watching it.
Yeah.
I think it does pretty well in a lot of areas,
Yeah.
but
It's
the
not
mistakes that it does have are so glaring and pop up so
right.
frequently that I
Yeah.
don't know that I could say it's a solid
Yeah.
film.
Like I love Rick, I love Evie, I love Jonathan, Ardith, and
Mhm,
Alex.
mhm.
You guys are doing great. wonderful. You're like top tier chefs, but you're working at Wendy's. Like I'm sorry, it's just you're not getting 5 stars from
Yeah.
me. It's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
You deserve better, to be
Yeah.
honest.
It felt like it was maybe kind of a first draft in a lot of ways, and they could have polished it up a little bit more if it weren't just banking on the fact that it was a sequel.
I almost feel like it's too many second or third drafts. Like it feels more like there are too
Mm,
many people having too many ideas all at the same time. Like
mhm.
because it like we've got things that just like we said aren't really necessary. We've got some rehashing. We've got some new stuff. Like nothing necessarily is blatant in like a lack of cohesion. But you do if you're like kind of just chilling watching this movie, you're like, what's going on? What are we
I mean, we
what are we
haven't
doing?
even talked about, like, the museum curator.
I know. And like, who is he? Like, Rick asks, who are these guys? And Ardith never answers that question. Because
Yeah.
where did they come from? Were they, with this whole fate idea, were they always going to dig up Emotep? If they were always going to dig
Mhm.
up Emotep, why?
It almost feels like it was something they were, like, planning on doing habitually because
Right,
the Scorpion King comes back every
right.
cycle or something.
Which, that doesn't make any sense. Because Evie says he comes back every 5,000 years. There have not been enough years for that to be a thing that has happened consistently.
Right.
So they have all that set up, the Egyptians and all that. They have all of this set up to prevent that and to fight that and to banish him back to the underworld. But all of that information can only exist, given the rules that we've been presented in this world, if it was given to them by the gods. Probably Anubis. Then you have to ask the question, hey, Anubis, if you don't want this to happen, how about you just not? You gave him
Mhm.
the powers, my guy. You built him this oasis. You have his soul. That was part of the deal. You own this guy. Maybe don't create the situation where the only way to beat him is for some dude to stab him with a spear. Not really in anywhere that's significant. Like, maybe you just don't do this at all, dude. Maybe.
Yeah. The premise is a little funky. It's a little
Yeah,
funky.
it is. There's also a little bit of like, hey, destiny and fate. What are you doing? Because again, if you don't want the Scorpion King to come back, don't give Evie any visions. Don't
Yeah.
reincarnate a Nox the New Moon. Because if you don't do that, nothing happens. Nothing.
Mhm.
Nothing at all.
Mhm.
Maybe don't keep the bracelet around. There are movies that are really dumb where like the thing that's important is also the key to something, kind of like Transformers Rise of the Beasts or an Infinity Stone or something where it's like, hey, if you don't need this bracelet for something and it's really dangerous, and if
So
someone puts it
throwing it
on,
to
they can
Mountain
raise an
Dew.
army. Yeah, like maybe just destroy it. Why not? Like,
Mhm.
well, maybe you argue you can't destroy it because it was made by a god. No, it wasn't. He was wearing that in the beginning of the movie. He already had that. Let's just destroy it. What are you doing,
Yep.
Anubis? What are you doing?
Mhm.
This is why I like
Mhm.
Khonshu more. But anyway, sorry, I had forgotten about that. I was thinking about that while watching, and then we got through our conversation, and I was like, yeah, those are my final thoughts. I was like, wait, no, I have something else to say.
Yeah. No, and it's we did our thing where we complained about the film most of the time. Like, it is important to reiterate, it's a fun film. It's
Oh,
a
very
decent
much,
film.
very
Like
much.
a 3 out of 5 star film,
Yeah,
but it's it's 3 out of 5
right.
stars.
It's Pizza Hut. It's still pizza, but it's
Mhm.
not good. But I'll eat
Mhm.
it. I might regret
Yeah.
it though. No, I won't regret it. I do think there's potential in my mind. This movie is better because I know what the next two hold in store. Um,
Mm. Mhm.
the next one might be a little bit weird just because it's so different. It might not be worth considering in like the in a trilogy mindset.
Okay.
And then the next one, that one after that Tom Cruise one, is let's say for the second conversation, it's not connected at all. It's basically a reboot, but it's so bad anyway. So like, these are our mummy movies, and at the end of the day, they're both good-ish, but one is definitely better than the
Alright,
other.
cool.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep. On to the next, and you
Mhm.
asked last or just a little bit ago if the Anoxina Moon and the love story is continued in the next one. Do you know what the next one is called? And if you don't,
No.
don't look it up. Okay, I'm gonna answer your question real quick, and this is what we're gonna end on: is your confusion, because the next one is called The Mummy: Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. Yep,
Like China?
yep, that's exactly right. All right, bye. See you next week.